Welcome to this episode of the Fro Wrestling Podcast. We are here to talk about all the things going on in the world of professional wrestling. We're going to get started today with Mario Ranallo and Jim Ross. The conversation has been in the last few weeks. Mario Ranallo has been off television since mid-March with what has been described as bipolar disorder or a depression situation. Either way, he's a huge advocate for mental health, but unfortunately, it has left WWE in a bit of a pickle. They need to have somebody on television calling the matches, and they've had to substitute as of late because of his absence on television due to this situation. Now, right around WrestleMania time, the story broke that Jim Ross has now signed a 2-year agreement with World Wrestling Entertainment to be a commentator. Now, the problem is, Jim Ross currently has a deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling to be a commentator for their shows on Access Television. His contract runs through 2018. The position that he has with them currently is the one that Ranallo had previously. When Ranallo's contract ran out with New Japan, he moved over to World Wrestling Entertainment, and Jim Ross was his replacement. And it's interesting because now that we're looking at this situation, Ranallo, for whatever reason he's leaving, a lot of it has been attributed to JBL's backstage banter and conversation. But at the end of the day, with Ranallo leaving, Jim Ross coming in, and the way the contracts are structured and when they run out, it would not be a surprise to see Ranallo make a return to New Japan Pro Wrestling as the commentator for their Access Television broadcast, especially considering they want to do this big North American expansion. Now, Jim Ross has announced that he will continue to do his New Japan Pro Wrestling announcing through this summer, where they're planning on having 2 G1 Climax events in North America, preferred possibly in Southern California. So that being said, you can't envision a scenario going forward where World Wrestling Entertainment would be okay with one of their contracted talents, a regular, hopefully at some point on their broadcast, going and doing broadcasting for another promotion. That's something that doesn't typically happen. So you would have to anticipate at some point Jim Ross will be moved off of the New Japan broadcast, and Mario Ranallo potentially could be going back. It's something where he has an existing history with them, and it's somewhere that he's been in the past where he's been very successful. So I would expect that to happen. It's a great thing for him. We're glad to hear that he's actually getting his feet back on the ground. He's now doing some announcing that is planned for boxing. He is hoping to get back into mixed martial arts, but we know that he does still have an interest in calling professional wrestling, and it looks like once his contract expires with World Wrestling Entertainment this summer, around August, then he'll be free to go ahead and do that again, potentially with places like New Japan Pro Wrestling. Moving ahead, speaking of JBL, the accusations came out earlier in the month about the Ranallo situation, but also last week there was conversation from Justin Roberts, who released his book, and in there discussed how JBL had essentially orchestrated somebody to take his passport while overseas and was a real bullying factor on the tour, so much to the point that he didn't even want to go on overseas tours anymore because he was being bullied by JBL and his entourage so much. Well, Johnny Mundo, the current Lucha Underground World Champion, has come out and had conversations about the fact that JBL actually sent him to be the one to steal the passport. He has substantiated Justin Roberts' claim in that he is the one who JBL was using to get his dirty work done. This is a black eye on the reputation of JBL. It's one that WWE needs to address. This has gone on for far too long. We talked in the last episode about his previous engagements when it was the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, attacking the Blue Meanie, talking about other people who've complained about JBL's treatment in the back, and at some point, WWE, if they really want to push this anti-bullying campaign that they've been doing for the last several years, they need to address it with their own talent. Handle JBL. If he can't get his act together and act like the consummate professional that he's supposed to be, then he needs to go. I don't care how popular he is with the fans. If he cannot be a role model citizen, what message would it be sending to the young people who watch the show if you allow a bully to continue to perpetrate stress and frustration on the roster? It's not even like he's an active in-ring competitor. He's a commentator. He's an announcer. Get him in line. That's what we need him to do. Moving on to Alberto El Patron. He has made it very clear. He had several rants this week on various interview outlets and whatnot, talking about his impression of WWE. He had some choice words for Triple H, but now the more important segment is that he talked about he knows, or so he claims, who it was who leaked Paige's sensitive information. If this is proven to be true, and I anticipate if he's making that kind of claim, at some point they'll release that information, I would expect some kind of litigation to take place. I would expect him to he and Paige both, to try to hold the person accountable for what they've done. I don't know that you can ever get back the reputation she had prior to that release, but maybe she can get some peace of mind going forward and maybe get some I don't want to say restitution, but get some peace of mind that some justice may be served if it really, in fact, was someone that he can identify who released that information. And finally, for this episode, Kurt Angle, it has been announced on several media outlets that the discussion has taken place, including the Wrestling Observer. The Wrestling Observer is reporting that if Kurt Angle can pass the WWE physical, he is very much in the plans to have an on-screen wrestling capacity role in World Wrestling Entertainment in the future. I don't know how far down the road that would be. Obviously, as I said before in a previous podcast, it would take some time to build up a storyline where someone would be so frustrated with the new Raw general manager that it would lead to a match. But one story that I haven't heard pitched anywhere else, and it's just what I'm thinking if I was booking this, and if you can get the two people cleared, and I know there's some sensitivity about that, especially with the one competitor, but you've got Raw's GM, Kurt Angle, who needs to get medical clearance, and you've got SmackDown's general manager, Daniel Bryan, who has issues getting medical clearance. But if you can get these two cleared to wrestle, Survivor Series would be an amazing opportunity to see the Raw and SmackDown GMs get in a ring and deliver one of the classic dream matches that people have talked about for years. Both wrestlers have claimed that they would love to see each other in the ring. I, for one, would love to see the match. It's one that no one ever thought they would see. And this is an opportunity with them being in the positions they're in. If it was me, I would book it. Find a way to make it happen. Daniel Bryan has been cleared by many doctors outside of WWE. There is no reason that WWE can't get him clearance for one match, especially after they just ran the angle on television that Seth Rollins could wrestle without clearance. It makes it really hard for them to claim that Daniel Bryan can't do the same. So that's all the time we have for this episode of the Pro Wrestling Video Podcast. Be sure to check our websites and links in both Podcast, Podbean, Podomatic, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever you get this podcast, SoundCloud. I'm sure there's 15 others that I'm not even thinking of. Wherever you get this podcast, do me a favor, pop in, give us some subscribes, give us some reviews, some likes, everything you can give feedback-wise, we appreciate. We are one of those podcasts who truly does care about the opinions and the input of our fans. Our global community, which continues to grow. You guys, I almost get emotional saying that. You guys are fantastic. We really appreciate all the support we've had from all our viewers all over the world. Until next time, take care, everybody, and we'll see you.